Hey, my friends, this is The Art of Prepping. I hope you guys are doing good today. Just thought I'd chat for a moment about everyday carry and to give you a few suggestions. I have over 20 suggestions. This is probably more for those who are kind of just new to all this. They're kind of just wondering about some of the more common options that people carry with them. And so I'm going to try to give you some of those, but in like reality or, in the big picture of things, there's like hundreds and hundreds of different things that are pretty common out there. So it's a pretty big world. The everyday carry world is pretty vast. And then when you start to get into specialty, niche market type of items, it gets really intricate. There are a lot of people out there, believe it or not, that have themes to their gear. For example, that all their gear is a certain color, or all their gear is made up of a certain material, or all their gear has to be under a certain weight. Some people, they just want things themed a certain way, such as like they want Donald Duck to be on all their gear, or Mickey Mouse. Right? You'd be surprised what's out there. And or there's also people who have themes that everything has to be, well, each item individually has to be under like $20 or $10. There's some people who just do like a budget challenge EDC. And then there's other people who are just like proud of their higher end EDC, that everything in their EDC has got to be like above $100 or $200. There's all kinds of ways that people go about this. There's really no right or wrong way with any of this. It's just really interesting though, of how people gravitate towards certain ideas, and then they actually execute those ideas. And they come up with these systems, these everyday carry systems, which are really interesting, how they pair things together. And I think that's probably the most interesting things. Of course, it just depends on your needs. Like, what do you need during your day? Because you don't want to be carrying around stuff that you never use, right? But it's really interesting how people pair this with that and that with this. And sometimes it really just kind of shocks me of like how like intuitive some of this is, and like how just, genius, like borderline genius putting things together is. And it's just really cool. So I don't talk about this a lot. Like I don't talk about it a lot because, there's a lot of people talk about this topic and stuff, but it's been a while since I've chatted about everyday carry or EDC, philosophy and, or suggestions of gear. So I'm not going to, for the most part, get into like name brands or nothing, but I just kind of want to do like an overview. Once again, this is mainly for the new person that, that's just kind of found the channel and they're like, yeah, I would like to carry something other than what I carry now. Maybe you just have 2 or 3 items that you keep in your pocket and you're like, I could probably use something else, but maybe you just don't know what that is. Maybe I can give you a few ideas. So let's just jump into it. And I'll try my best not to be too long-winded. I'm going to do this in a format that is more like a podcast. So it's just going to be audio. And let's just jump into it. So the first is a pen. I tell you what, that's something that for me, once I start carrying a pen, it changed a lot of things, like in a very big, surprising way. Just because I can jot down notes in a very organic way versus before I would sometimes just get on my phone and go into like an app. I have like a notepad app and I would just type out like a note or a thought. But I really enjoy the more organic process of just writing it out with a pen on a piece of paper, or what I use those micro notepads, and they're like the next step down from like a 3x5 notepad. In fact, they're quite a bit smaller than a 3x5. I don't know the actual size of my micro notepads, but they're almost half the size probably of my 3x5 notepads. And so they're really good. In fact, the ones I have, they fit in a credit card slot in my wallet, and they're just really, really handy. And so like, there's a lot of times that like, if I'll be somewhere waiting to do something, maybe I'm in a waiting room or whatever, there's just sometimes thoughts that will pop in my head, or maybe a solution to a problem pops in my head, and I don't want to lose it. Right. So I want to write that down. And so it comes in real, real handy. Or maybe you just need to sign something or fill in a form. Having your own pen is really nice. And I know it's not really like sexy or, impressive, but I just carry a Bic round stick, just the medium point. It's the ballpoint pen. And what I do is I take the body of the pen, also known as the barrel, I just cut it down a little bit. And so it's not full size. And so it's just easier to carry. Some of them I haven't cut down a lot, so they can fit like in a wallet, or a pouch or something. But yeah, there you go. Now, the next thing I want to say is this, and that it's so common sense. I'm not going to really just sit here and talk about it very long at all. And that's just to have some type of means to communicate with others. And of course, a cell phone is the answer, right? There's so many things a cell phone can do otherwise than just communicate to other people. You can research things. You can use the flashlight feature. There's apps for all kinds of things. And what the cell phone, what I typically do is pair it up with a battery pack. And I just keep the battery pack, or, like some people call it other things like, like a power bank or whatever. But I just keep mine in my backpack. I don't really like to keep extra battery bank or whatever battery pack in my pocket, unless you're talking about the really small ones that give you like maybe a quarter charge or a half charge, more like an emergency backup battery. Those are pretty easy to carry, but I just keep those things in my backpack, right? And you can do whatever you want, but that's just what I do. And, when it comes to like something else that I like to kind of carry with me, and that is stamps. I like to keep a few stamps in my wallet, or, I'll get into like how I actually carry money in my credit cards. It's not really like a traditional wallet, but where I keep all my stuff. I like to keep, stamps in there. And then I also like to keep stamps in my backpack and a few in the console of my car. And stamps are just so handy. I still mail things. I know there are some people who hardly ever mail anything, so maybe that's not such a big deal. But, there's a few times a month I need some stamps, so it's good to have them around. A small book just for entertainment, I think that's great. And I don't typically put little books or something like that in my pocket, but maybe in my backpack, I'll keep a few in my car, especially if I need to kind of just burn up a little bit of time if I'm waiting for someone or something. That's just really nice to have something to kind of read that's interesting. And, like sometimes I get those really small format books that go over like the Guinness Book of, World Records or whatever. And they kind of talk about the records, or they talk maybe like a book of facts that you kind of just learn about the world and how things are or whatever. It's just interesting. Now let's go ahead and talk about the wallet. Now, when I was a kid, I was given by a grandparent like a big, bulky, leather wallet. And I thought that was just normal. And I carried that for a long period of time. And it was still working just fine. Like it wasn't worn out after many years. Like those things can last and last and last. But I started to realize, or just pay attention to other people's wallets. And I kind of recognized the fact that, wow, my wallet was ridiculous. It was just super bulky and heavy. And it was just comical because all I had in my wallet, because I was so young, right? I mean, I was too young to even get a driver's license. I didn't have an ID. And so all I had in there was typically a couple bucks, like $2 or $3, because I was just a kid, right? I didn't have a job at that age. I was so young, like a preteen or so. And so I had a couple dollars in there, and then maybe like a picture of my family and maybe a couple like, ticket stubs of when I went to the movies, and maybe a couple coupons or something in there. And that was it. And it was just ridiculous that I'm carrying this big old wallet when there's hardly anything in there. But some of my friends, they had like nylon wallets, and I'm like, woo, I really like those. And I mean, I waited a number of years to get mine because I was like, feeling a little guilty about not using, the wallet that was given to me by grandma. But this big old leather wallet that I was given was, once again, it was just ridiculous. It was just so big. And so I eventually got me a nylon wallet, and it was just like, wow, this is so much better. But that was back in the day still. And the nylon wallets were still not very streamlined as they are now, or at least that you can find. And so over time, I kept on upgrading into more streamlined nylon wallets. And then I took a little break from it and tried like a money clip. And, I did that for a few months, but it just didn't work out very well. The money clip that I was trying, it didn't have the greatest retention. I know that there are some that do better than others, but the one that I had just didn't do that great. So I retired the money clip and went back to a nylon wallet. And then, in the recent years, I've gone to, a coin pouch, just a real simple nylon coin pouch. It's just large enough to put credit cards and IDs and basically cash, and it's just good to go. And the one that I have is made very well, and there's just no complaints. So that's kind of like my wallet. And so it's interesting to kind of look back on the evolution of where you've been to where you are now, because it gives you a lot of insight of maybe of where you're wanting to go in the future. But for me, though, when it comes to this particular carry option, I don't think I'd ever go back to a traditional wallet. Like for me, the coin pouch is self-contained. Like I can put everything in there that I need. It's very, very compact and trim, super lightweight, and it has a zipper. Mine has a really high-end YKK zipper, and everything is kind of just like sealed in there. I can just close it with the zipper and not have to worry about things falling out. And it has an attachment point that if I want to kind of like clip it to like a key ring or something like that, I could do that. It's just really optimal for me. And like, I can't even think of any other system that would be better. So it is possible that this coin pouch is kind of like the pinnacle. Now there might be other coin pouches that come out that's even better than what I have. But right now it's like I've hit like what I think is almost like the ideal system when it comes to carrying, credit cards, money and all that stuff. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that you'll kind of know on a deeper level when you've kind of hit something like you found a solution to an everyday carry problem of how to carry things on your person, in the most efficient way. I mean, it kind of goes along the theme also, like, let's say like a tool, like you have a certain tool and you try to carry it in your pocket, but it's just not going to work. It's just bouncing around in your pocket. It just feels weird. It's distracting. But once you put it into, a belt pouch and that tool is more secure and it's not flopping around, then you might have a solution. So it's the same theme. So let's jump to the next, and that would be keys. And of course, when we're talking about keys, you have to have keys. So that keys are keys. But what about the key ring, or the key chain, if you will? That right there gives you an opportunity to carry typically a few other things. Now, I wouldn't go overboard, but that's, of course, your prerogative. I used to have like massive key rings with just stuff everywhere on there, 5, 6, even sometimes more items just jammed on the key ring. So bulky, but that was when I was super young. And now I try to keep maybe just 1 or 2 things extra on there at a most. I'm almost like a minimalist when it comes to my key ring. And so what are some of the real common things that you find on people's key rings or keychains? You typically find like a real small light, and that's what I keep, on one of mine. And I also have like a small multi-tool, sometimes a little pocket knife or just a cutting tool. And then, there's a lot of people who like to keep maybe like a mini pry bar. That's just something I've been noticing. I don't know if that's just like a fad or something or what, but I see like these little widgets and gadgets that kind of have like a pry feature and like maybe some other little tools, but like these little solid state multi-tools. And so that could be an option. I mean, that's not like the worst thing to have on hand. And then, of course, all the swag, right? All the swag that if you go on a vacation and you want to remember that vacation and you get some kind of key ring accessory, I mean, that's pretty common. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's more of a morale booster, if anything, and that counts, right? It may not be that practical. I mean, it may not do anything. I mean, sometimes you can find some swag that maybe has like a bottle opener or something, that's built into the, the little widget or gadget or whatever, or that swag. So that's just something to look at. But yeah, for the most part, it is really nice to keep the key ring as minimal as possible to reduce bulk and weight, because especially if you have to keep it in your pocket, that thing it can be bouncing around when you're walking. It just shifts around. It can be very uncomfortable. So I've just learned to put the minimum amount on my key ring and try to carry the minimum amount of keys. Like I don't want to carry like keys to things that I almost never use, or that I only like the lock is only in the house. Like if I'm going out, why am I bringing keys with me to locks that are within the house? Like I just need the house key, right? I just need maybe the gate key and the car key, and that's about it, right? I mean, you don't need all these other keys to get in access in other parts of your house. Once, you can have a lockbox set up in your house so that once you're in your house, you can access this lockbox or a specific safe that just holds keys versus you just having this massive key ring. That's just kind of how I look at it. Okay, so we talked about keys. The next here is the multi-tool. And this is something that can vastly range from person to person. This is the one that I think that probably has the most variance, and a lot of people that I talk to and around. So you have everything from the keychain size multi-tool, which could be a solid state multi-tool. It could just be that simple. It could just be one piece of material that has various things cut out on it. And then you also can go up to, small compact multi-tools that can clip in your pocket. And then you have some multi-tools that are so bulky and big that they have to go on your belt in like a pouch. And then there's some of them as well that some people are just still not comfortable even on their waist, that they want to store in like a toolbox or in their backpack. So there's like this massive range of multi-tools. And I'm talking about the traditional, quote unquote, like multi-tool. And there are some multi-tools that are like, pry bars that have other features and stuff that are full size, like they're big tools. I'm talking about, tools that are like portable. But when we're talking about multi-tools, you also have to look at like cutting tools. This is where the pocket knife really comes in. I mean, a lot of people do carry a pocket knife, but then there's also a lot of people who don't. Some people who carry a multi-tool, they're okay with the blade on the multi-tool, and they just don't carry a pocket knife. They're just, they don't need two different blades. But there's some people who like to have a pocket knife that's very easy to, access, and it's, you can open with one hand. And a lot of multi-tools, they still don't have that option. Some of them do, but most that I know of, they don't really have it so that you can just access super easy and with one hand open up the main blade or whatever, the cutting blade, and use it. But with pocket knives, it's pretty much designed. Most of them are designed now to be retrieved by one hand, to be opened by one hand, and in a lot of cases to even be closed with one hand. And with pocket knives, you can also kind of be very specific if you want a combo edge or just a plain edge or a fully serrated edge, or what type of blade steel, what type of handle material, what type of pocket clip. You can have all these different options that you really don't have typically with a multi-tool blade. So there's a big reason why, pocket knives are just so popular, and that people don't just default to their multi-tool blade. So that's definitely something that, I think it's kind of a must for most people. I really think that everybody should carry a pocket knife, and maybe you don't need a multi-tool, but at least have a pocket knife. And for those who don't need pliers and things like that, like larger tools on their multi-tool, you can go with really compact multi-tools. Victorinox has a full line of their medium and small size multi-tools. They are really practical. They have different drivers. They have small scissors, the blades, can openers, all kinds of just, stuff that it's nice to have just in case. And some of those multi-tools weigh only maybe like an ounce or two. So definitely check those out. The next thing I want to talk about is tape. I don't typically find myself in need of tape when I'm out and about very much, but what I have done is just take a very small section of Gorilla Tape and folded it over on itself a few times and put it in one of my credit card slots in my wallets in the past when I used to carry like a traditional wallet. But now that I don't carry a traditional wallet, I just slip it into my coin pouch. And I don't really carry a lot of tape. I'm not going to sit here and say, I have like 100 feet of tape in my coin pouch. No, that's not true. But what I will say is I probably have maybe like 3 inches of Gorilla Tape, at least, maybe even 4. But what it is, it's the 2-inch. It's the 2-inch Gorilla Tape. So it's like a 2x3 or 2x4 inch strip. And it's just folded over a few times. And really, it's no problem. It's just nice to have it, available in case I need to patch something. And in a worst case scenario, if you get injured, you could use it as well to kind of keep a wound closed until you can get help. Okay. And of course, there are some people who like to carry a little bit of super glue, for various reasons, even for emergency medical reasons, if they need to, close a larger wound or whatever. It's not really the best thing to put in a wound is glue. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do. But I don't personally do that, though. I mean, at one point, just for a few months, I did carry one of those real small tubes of crazy glue, but I never used it. And I was just kind of like one of those things I took out after a while. Now let's move on. So we talked about tape, and we could store it in our wallet or a coin pouch, or you could store it, even in a backpack. And of course, I have a couple of rolls of Gorilla tape that I keep in my car and so forth as well. So it's just good to have some tape. What about snacks? I mean, you almost can't argue with having a few snacks around. I mean, it could be just like traditional food bar. It could be just some gum or some candy. It could be mints, whatever you're into. It is kind of nice. It is kind of nice, especially though if you're like diabetic and you sometimes have crashes, like when you need a little sugar, you definitely want to have some candy spread around. I mean, this is a given. I mean, you should already have this and you should already know this, but there's a lot of people who just don't have the forethought. When I used to work a job that I was in public, and this was a number of years ago, that I had this certain job that there was a gentleman that came into the place of employment, and he kind of crashed. Like he had a blood sugar just crash. And so I was able to help him get his blood sugar up enough so that he was functional again. But I mean, he literally was like ready to pass out. And that's a pretty scary thing to be involved in. And thank God I don't have those issues, and I don't really know many people who had that issue, but apparently it is a prevalent thing for some people. So you got to stay on top of your health and have, backup solutions in case you didn't eat enough and your blood sugar got too low. Another thing, though, that is also really, really common in the EDC world is lights. Man, I mean, we can have a whole series of videos on this and not even scratch the surface. So you have your keychain or key ring, lights, which for a lot of people, it's just their backup light. But I know plenty of people, though, that are into like a minimalist setup, and their key ring light is their main and only light. And I mean, it's somewhat understandable if you have a good, robust, light. And I mean, some of these are just really small, but some of them are pretty good too, I mean, you don't want to knock them just because they're small. But for most people, though, that are kind of more serious with being prepared and having a good, solid, redundant EDC, they have a primary light that they keep in their pocket. Like it has like a little pocket clip, and some people have it, like a belt holster, or a pouch. But most people I know, they just have one in their pocket, and they have a little pocket clip. And then, of course, there are some people who like to have a light on their firearm as well. You don't really see it like a lot, but it does seem like in certain circles and certain types of people that it's becoming a little bit more prevalent. It seems like it is, because weapon lights now are getting so small that it's literally only adding maybe just a few ounces, and it's not really that bulky anymore. Like it used to be that if you had a weapon light 5, 6, even 10 years ago, I mean, it was very substantial. Like for the most part, you just kind of, you avoided it because it was just not really ideal for most weapons. But nowadays they've kind of shrunk technology down, and it is what it is, but at least have a light, regardless of if it's on a gun or if it's in your pocket or on your keychain. At least have one of those, have something, because there's been so many times myself and other people I know have just needed a light. Things happen so suddenly. Like it could be out in the middle of the day too, but you drop something under your steering wheel and it's dark under there. It might be like the sunniest day it might be the brightest day out in your whole life, but it's dark in your car. And maybe for whatever reason, whatever the lights in your car are not bright enough to really shine down in the shadows of under your dash or something where you drop something, or under your seat. I've had that happen. I've dropped things, or things have fell out of my pocket, or slipped out of my pocket and gone under my seat. And I'm like, can't even see down there because it's so dark. And so I had to use my flashlight. So, I mean, it's amazing like how flashlights are so handy. And of course, like in the dark, like if you're out late at night or whatever, flashlights can also be used as part of a self-defense system. I mean, if your light is bright enough, and it doesn't even have to be that bright, if your eyes have been adjusted to the dark, just even a moderately bright flashlight can really, kind of mess with your eyes for a little while, And I mean, in some cases, it can almost like blind you, for a number of seconds. And so if someone is threatening you or whatnot, sometimes just a blast of light in someone's face is enough to kind of buy you enough time to get away. And so there's that. So definitely make sure you have a light of some sort. And some people go the next step and they keep a spare battery for their light or multiple spare batteries in their backpack or in their car. That's up to you. I think it's a good idea. I personally do that as well. Now let's talk about the mirror. Now this is something that you can get small signal mirrors, because people are always asking me, what would be a good mirror for everyday carry? So here we go. They have small signal mirrors that literally cost just a few dollars. I mean, I think it's like $4 or $5 at most big box stores, at least the ones in my area. And you can get these small name brand signal mirrors that can slip into a credit card slot in your wallet if you carry a wallet, or in a pouch or whatever you use. Basically, you can put them in a pocket. It's almost like there is no excuse not to have one of these. They weigh, in a lot of cases. I have all kinds of signal mirrors, but like some of them weigh like an ounce or less. Like, so it's not an issue with like bulk or weight. But a mirror, why would you need a mirror? So it's easy to carry one, and they're inexpensive and they're widely available. But in case you get injured and you can't see the injury site, it's so nice to have a mirror to locate and to examine the injury site. Or maybe you have something in your eye and you can't see, your eye because you're looking out from your eye. So if you have a mirror, you can see if there's something in your eye. Or if there's an injury to your face, it's you can't see it, so you need something to reflect back to it. So anyways, a mirror is really common sense. Of course, you can always use it for other things, right? I mean, you can use it for the actual intended use to signal in an emergency, to get attention, for rescue applications. There's all kinds. You can use it to signal to people from at a distance, if you have a code set up ahead of time. You can do code, and you can, send a message or whatever to another party that may be on another mountain or a hillside, or maybe you're just a mile away or 100 feet away, and you just wanted to communicate to the group that, hey, everything's okay, or whatever. You have a signal mirror, but that gets a little more complicated. But you can do a lot with a mirror, especially if it's a good quality signal mirror. And the ones that I typically get are made of some type of resin material that has a reflective quality to it, or a reflective material that's embedded into like the resin. I do have some all glass mirrors, but they're just not as safe if you're going to be carrying them around all day. Maybe like in a real hardcore survival kit, the glass mirrors would probably be a little bit better, just because it definitely gives you a little bit more clarity and a little more like reach typically in terms for signaling. If you want to really signal in a real emergency, you want to have glass. But some of these resin or composite signal mirrors have gotten better over the years. So they're not horrible. But they're typically still not as good as glass. But once again, they're better than nothing. The next thing I want to bring up is a lighter. Everybody has their thing, when it comes to fire. Some people say there's no reason to have fire on my person because I never use fire. I mean, if you've never had a need for fire, it might be a little hard for me to sit here and say you need to have a lighter on your person or in your backpack, at all times. But you just don't know, right? Now, I will admit that maybe half the time I don't go out in public with a lighter or some type of fire source, but the other half I do. So, and what I have noticed is that it's a lot easier to carry like a mini Bic lighter than the full size. It's just less bulk and all that. But you can go with small lighters, and so a lighter gives you so many options. Sometimes you might have something that is starting to fray, for example, and you can use that heat to seal up that material. For example, polyester and nylon, if you have like a backpack and there's a thread that's coming out or something, or a stitching that's getting loose, I've had many times just use my lighter just for a few seconds. And that gives me enough heat to kind of seal up that spot. And so it doesn't continue to unravel or to become a problem, you know? And so, of course, there's other things too. You can use, you know, you can make an emergency, you know, fires, you know, for heat if you have to like shelter in the woods and all this stuff, right? I mean, if you need light, I mean, it's not the most efficient form of light, you know, coming from a lighter, but it is light. And some people have like a big debate though about lighters. You know, should you just use a traditional Bic lighter, or should you go with like a jet lighter, or should you go with, they have these electronic lighters, you know, like what do you do, you know? I mean, when growing up, you know, I mean, most people I knew didn't have lighters. And if they did, it was the old Zippo lighters. But a lot of people back in the day would just carry a little like packet of matches. I mean, that was really common for me growing up. Nowadays, though, I don't know many people who carry a little pack of matches. But, you know, there probably still are people. And of course, there's other ways to make fire. But you might want to look at that. It's not like for everyone it's essential to have a lighter. Because I will be completely honest, it's pretty rare that I ever use my lighter. It really, really is. That's why there's a lot of times I just don't really have the motivation to put it in my pocket. But at the very minimum, though, I like to have one at least in my backpack or one in my car. So if I do need one, it's close at hand. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is the whistle. This is something that is like, for a lot of guys, it's kind of hard to kind of convince yourself to kind of carry one. And I have like several survival keychains that I put together over the years. And I have some videos on that. If you're interested, just search the channel for survival keychains. And so obviously I have a whistle. I have some really nice whistles on those kind of survival keychains. But in terms of like, you know, my actual keychain or key ring, you know, that I keep my car, you know, key on, or my house keys, I mean, there's been times that I've had a whistle on those, but I've actually removed those in recent days. And I keep the whistle typically like in my backpack or in the console of my cars. I have a couple whistles. And, you know, unless I'm just going like traveling, I mean, if I'm traveling to like a new location, especially a larger city, which I rarely do, but if I just do for whatever reason, if I'm traveling, then I definitely want to bring a whistle. And I'll probably put that on my key ring. But if I'm just staying local, because I live in a more rural area, I just really don't know. I guess I just don't think I would use it. But at the same time, there might be an emergency. I might need someone's attention to help me. So maybe it would be a better idea if I put that back on there. But it is something you might want to consider at least. That's what I'm trying to get across here. You might want to have that debate with yourself as well. And of course, all whistles are not the same. I mean, there are some whistles that are just much more advanced than others. Fox 40 is pretty good, and there's definitely a few others, but you want to do a little bit of research and see what works best for you. The next thing I want to talk about is a watch. And for some people, a watch is more like jewelry these days. And there's not really a necessary need unless you're talking about a smartwatch. But, you know, a lot of people say it's so redundant to have a watch when your cell phone can tell the time. I mean, it's somewhat true, but if you're like me, though, don't you get kind of tired of always having to pull out your phone out of your pocket or off your belt just to see what time it is versus just taking your wrist and just moving it over to see what time? I mean, there still is a place in the modern day for watches. It's not just bling or jewelry. You know, it's not just jewelry or an accessory. It's a real functional thing. I mean, it's so much more easy, at least for most of us, just to kind of look down at a watch than to pull out a cell phone and all that. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but I think there's still a place for watches. So now let's talk about eyewear. You know, there's a lot of times that a lot of people just overlook this. They just don't like things on their face. I understand if you're not really into eyewear, then, you know, definitely consider a good hat. You know, but when it comes to like sun protection in general, some type of head covering or an eyewear, like some decent sunglasses, really just kind of make a lot of sense. I mean, this goes without saying, right? Really. I mean, But when I look at sunglasses, I just try to make sure that they have a decent level of impact resistance. That's just something that I look at. And I like the frames on my sunglasses to be somewhat substantial. You know, I don't like them to be made of like injected molded plastic that's going to be brittle out in the heat and it's going to snap or whatever. So, you know, just kind of, you know, just look at the quality. The next thing I want to bring up, and this is obviously something that is kind of more like, you know, personal to you about, you know, what you select. And of course, at the time of this video, we have a so-called pandemic going on. So people are kind of carrying with them surgical face mask or extra hand sanitizer. Some people already, before all this happened, was carrying hand sanitizer. I was one of those. But I typically kept some hand sanitizer in the console of my vehicle and also my backpack. And it was only if I'm like really going to be out in public for a number of hours at a time, then I would bring the hand sanitizer with me. At one point, though, I did have hand sanitizer on my key ring, but now I just kind of just slip it in my pocket. There's these little bottles that I have. And so, yeah, so like some type of face mask, hand sanitizer, lip balm, lotions, any type of medicines. It could be prescription or non-prescription. First aid kits. Some people build little first aid kits in their wallets or their purses or in their pouches. And then there are some people who are even more concerned about their personal well-being, especially when they're out in public, and they may carry a very basic trauma kit, especially if they can still carry a weapon. And so there you go. Definitely some things to look at. I would admit up front, though, that trying to carry around even a very small basic trauma kit, it takes a lot of practice, and it has to be more like a habit to do it, because you may do it the first few times, you know, in a willing fashion, but after a while, it becomes kind of cumbersome to carry that stuff around unless you have a real system worked out. So you want to streamline all this as much as possible. Like the more you want to carry, the more strategic that you need to be to carry all this, because you will get burnt out over time. And one day you'll wake up and say, I'm just not going to carry that anymore. So you have to be consistent, and to be consistent, you have to find a system that works. Bandanas and handkerchiefs. I mean, this is something that I really find useful. And I mean, all my life, in fact, I mean, up until I was like in my mid 20s, I did the whole handkerchief thing, you know, like I was never really like into the bandanas just because I thought it was just too big and bulky, but not so much. Now I prefer a bandana over a handkerchief. It's really interesting how things have changed. Now, I typically do wear like cargo pants, and so I have extra pockets that I can slip a bandana in. And as you know, bandanas don't weigh very much. In fact, I literally can't even feel them in my pockets, but it's just good to know that I have it there. I mean, it could be, you know, put into various roles. It could be a makeshift face mask. It could be used as an emergency bandage. You could use it for so many things, you know, tinder if you're like lost in the woods and you need to make a fire. You make repairs with it. All, you know, it's almost, I mean, it's amazing what you can do with certain products. And so a bandana is kind of, it's one of those things, just like, you know, tape and bandanas kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways because they're so multi-use capable. So let's now jump into the lethal and non-lethal self-defense options. Definitely, I'm not going to get into this very much. I have multiple videos over the years that I've done on this, but like pepper gel or spray is definitely something that's real popular. You know, pepper spray can be found in like all different size canisters and all different strengths too. You want to pay attention to the concentration and, you know, how hot is that spray? Some of the sprays are not that hot and some of them are really hot. And then you have tasers, stun guns. I'm not a big thing on the whole stun gun thing because it requires you to be so close to the person. At least with a taser, you can keep your distance. But in a lot of cases, depending on the clothes that a person is wearing, the taser may not be able to penetrate certain clothing very well and make contact and be, you know, usable. So I'm not the biggest fan of, but you know, like, tasers and stun guns. And the pepper sprays, I'm not the biggest fan of. I go with the pepper gel. But I do think that a collapsible baton, once again, then this requires you to be up close and personal, which is not the greatest thing. But if the person is already in your face, then collapsible baton is good. And then you have the lethal options, handgun, blades, things like that, if things get real nasty. And of course, a lot of people are like, hey, if you have a handgun, you definitely need a good holster. You definitely want to carry a tourniquet. And you definitely probably want to at least look at the option of having a light on your gun. So just something to consider. Also, when it comes to the blades for like lethal self-defense, I would recommend a fully serrated blade. You know, I mean, at the very minimum, maybe a combo edge, but there's actually quite a few blades out there that are made for fighting. And I would go with the fully serrated because you have that much more ability to really get aggressive and to do more damage. Let's now look at how to have a little bit of cordage on your person. There's 3 ways that I kind of, keep cordage on my person. I take parachute cord and I weave it in my shoelaces, or replace my shoelaces, with the parachute cord. I also sometimes wear a parachute cord wristband. Sometimes they refer to it as like a survival bracelet or whatever, but I just call it a paracord wristband. And, you can get all different types of parachute cord out there. There's different types. I mean, there's like type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and you can get different strengths, different thicknesses. You can do different weaves and braids, and, there's all kinds of stuff, different colors out there and all this blah, blah, blah. But just have some, so if you ever needed it, you have, you can pull from somewhere. And the last way that I sometimes use this is a belt. Now, I don't really have a lot of belts made of parachute cord, and you can do this yourself. I made my own, but yeah, you just braid together a bunch of paracord. I mean, it takes a bit depending on how big you are, of course, but you can make your own belt. And there's different techniques though that you can unravel this in a pretty fast format, because you don't want it like a very technical braid that takes forever to undo if you need all this, right? So you have to kind of look at certain braids that are easy to take apart. Just like with the wristband, there are definitely some ways better than others in terms of having quick access to some cordage. And you may be asking, well, why would you want to have accessibility to cordage? Well, you can make repairs with cordage. You can do so much. Just look into the world of that. I mean, it's almost like, once again, going back to the comparison of like tape, like duct tape of some type and bandanas and things like that. I mean, parachute cord is way up there as a multi-use item. And the last thing I want to bring up here before I want to end this video is to have a hidden handcuff key. Now, you may be asking, why would you want that? I know a lot of people who have their handcuff key on their key ring or in their wallet. I don't really think that's the best place for it. I mean, it's probably better than nothing, but it's just one of those things that I think it's best if it's hidden in your clothing somewhere, like behind a button. If it's secured, maybe like in a special like hidden compartment on your clothing, like a little pouch that's maybe just hand sewn in. Or if it's like hidden in your shoe somewhere, maybe under your insole, something like that makes more sense. Because, and I'm not saying do anything, illegal or unlawful, right? I'm not saying that at all with this. I'm just saying if you were illegally detained, like if you were kidnapped and the person used handcuffs, well, it sure would be nice to have an option to get out of those quickly, instead of trying to fumble around and making something to try to shimmy to shim the handcuffs open. So, you have that kind of issue that in the day and age that we live in, and of course, just depending on where you live, some locations this probably would never happen, but some places, you got some nasty, sick people that, are willing to do some crazy things to people if they think they can get away with it. And so sometimes, the time is ticking, and it's been proven statistically, though, the longer that you're being held captive, or the longer you are in a kidnapping event, the lower your probability of survival. So if someone is, got you in a trunk of a car and they got you handcuffed, and you have this means to get access to your handcuff key and get undone, maybe at the next stoplight, you bail out of the trunk. A lot of trunks have like a way to release from the inside, and you can access that and jump out of the trunk and get to help, And also one more thing, a little bonus thing. A lot of people have thought this through, so this is not like, any kind of breaking news here. But in terms of keeping a spare key, like a spare house key in your wallet, I don't think it's a good idea, because first and foremost, you typically have your ID, right, in your wallet, and it has your address. And if you lose your wallet, or if you get robbed, or if it's just stolen, people not only know who you are, who they stole from, but where you live. And if there's a house key, they might be able to easily have access to your house and get there before you get there. And so they could rob you as well. And just them knowing where you live is bad enough, but to be in your house as well, it's just horrible. So you don't really want to do that at all. Don't put your house key. You want to find another way to put a backup key. And it's probably better across the board to like have a secure location on your property, or have a hidden key location so you can store a key there on the property and not on your person per se. I know some people who have like little key vaults that's like actually bolted on or secured to their vehicle, and that gives you access to a spare house key or something. So that's another option. But I think it's just a little bit too dangerous these days to actually have a spare key or to keep a list of passwords, and so forth in your wallet. I think that's just not a good idea. So anyways, I hope this helps on some level. Everyday carry conversations are fun. I hope these suggestions, these ideas are beneficial to you, or at least one of these things kind of, get you thinking about something that you might want to try. So, hey, thanks so much for checking this video out. You guys take care.